Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
We would like to wish a very good evening and warm welcome to Founder Trustee Shri Suresh Bhai Oza, Managing Trustee Shri Jairaj Thakkar, Trustees Srimati Urvashi Thakkar, Shri Sujay Jairaj and Srimati Meenal Thakkar. The Head of School, Srimati Jasmine Madhani, Principal of Jamnabai Nursery School, Srimati Zeenat Bhojaboy and her team. Senior Advisor, Srimati Josephine Vaz.
Members of the Advisory Board, Deputy Head of School, Shri Michael Gramlich, IBDP Coordinators, Dr. Sameer Jale and Srimati Rini Ghosh, IGCSE Coordinator, Srimati Neeta Rajguru, MYP Coordinator, Srimati Sonal Chabria, PYP Coordinator, Srimati Purti Singh, Managers, Shri Firdos Lala and Shri Sanjay Lad, JNPTA Vice Chairperson, Shri Manan Doshi and his team, Jamnabai Nasi Alumni Association Chairperson, Srimati Atashi Patel and her team, and now presenting this event's driving force, Head Organizer of TEDxYouth JNIS2022, Aryan Ghosh.
My name is Aryan Ghosh, and I'm the Head Organizer for TEDxYouth JNIS2022. TEDx gives us an opportunity to share our experiences and inspire, build curiosity, and engage with the world. Organizing a TEDx event during this pandemic has been challenging, yet a fulfilling and holistic experience. So a big thank you to our audience for being here with us today to share our experiences. The theme for our event is Behind the Mask. In our world today, the mask has become a symbol of resilience and solidarity in face of adversity, against the unknown and uncertain. Yet, we've been wearing one long before the pandemic. Our theme focuses on the metaphor of the mask as an envelope while aiming to uncover what lies beneath the false pretenses, flawed information, and concealed emotions. Don't we all carry masks daily, obscuring our true selves and sentiments, covering up to please others or to hide the despair within? At TEDxYouth JNIS, we seek to pursue the unfiltered truth behind the masks of deception. The times we are living in are life-changing and threaten human relations. It is now more important than before to bring out awareness, inspire change, do the extraordinary, and overcome barriers. Through this event, we hope to spread brightness in the dark. As TEDxYouth JNIS2022 comes together, we look forward to amplifying the stories and creative ideas of our local speakers. We want to showcase the ways in which the mask acts as an envelope to uncover what is hidden under the false pretenses and information. So before we proceed to our first speaker, I would like to give a big shout out to our incredible organizing committee of TEDxYouth JNIS2022, who have worked tirelessly to make this event memorable for all of you. And also all our teachers, Ms. Sweta and Ms. Balamani, supervisors at JNIS, without whose support none of this would be possible. Thank you.
Sara Mukhtiar is a theatre enthusiast and proactive student. Being a passionate writer, she loves how writing makes her feel and lets her imagination run wild. Additionally, she's a phenomenal speaker and has successfully achieved a distinction at public speaking at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art at the Grade 7 level. She believes behind the mask symbolizes hidden emotions, outward pretenses, and mental health struggles. She wishes to use her voice to create a ripple for change with vulnerability. Presenting to you Sara Mukhtiar, our student speaker at TEDxYouth at JNIS 2022.
Jilted. My thoughts are cabbard and shallow, my tears like the bitter blinking yellow of an Aztec star. Tonight the caustic wind love gossips late and soon, as I wear the weary puckered face of the sour lemon moon. While like an early summer plum, punny, green and tart, droops upon its wizened stem, my lean, unripened heart. By Sylvia Plath, one of the most dynamic and admired poets of the 20th century, who took her own life at the young age of 30. There are usually two reasons we talk about depression in metaphors, poems, art, or even music. Number one, because it's easier to paint a sour lemon moon rather than to admit to having a mental disorder. And number two is because saying you have depression doesn't begin to explain the vast, unimaginable pain that you are experiencing. The English language's greatest tragedy is the word depression. It is appalling that we use the same adjective to describe both a boy who can't find his favorite candy in the store and also a man who is minutes away from taking his own life. And I think that this is the most modern problem with depression. It has lost its intensity. While the evolution of depression from the 18th century madness to our modern day awareness is something I'm sure we are all grateful for, we must remember the responsibility we have. We are accountable for what the future generations will know as depression. We cannot let this disorder become just another phase of life. Depression is an illness. It is the leading cause of disability worldwide, and suicide is a direct result of this disease. The CDC reports that around 22% of high schoolers have seriously thought about taking their own life. That's roughly 1 in 5 teenagers who have seriously considered killing themselves. Depression is an illness that can cause death. It must not lose its severity when we talk about it. I recently saw a post of a cartoon. It had an interviewer and an interviewee. The interviewer asks, "Where do you see yourself in a year's time?" And to that the interviewee replied, "Highly positioned." But above this man's head was a thought bubble, which had a picture of him hanging from a noose, lifelessly positioned, but highly positioned. The caption of that post was, "Every teen from Gen Z at a job interview, LMAO." But there was a comment that said, "You have to stop with the suicide jokes." Unfortunately to that, someone replied, "Don't worry, it will soon," with a gravestone emoji. Today, the internet is flooded with memes about depression, with jokes about a declining mental health, and a new phenomenon called casually suicidal, as Sarah Liberty accurately termed it. But these jokes don't come from a person with a simply bad sense of humor. They come from a person struggling to articulate their truth. And they come because of us as a society struggling with accepting that naked candor of powerful human emotion. Humor is only a band-aid to this broken bone. A lot of us can relate to the battle of depression, whether we have fought with it in the past or are fighting now. We all know that these jokes are only a mask to hide the seriousness of depression and its effect on one's life. And while these jokes may temporarily hide the pain, it cannot permanently erase the pain. So when we talk about depression, we have to remember the seriousness it holds. And the actuality about hiding from the truth of depression is that it only worsens the condition immensely. Depression is like a knot in the string of life. And when you ignore it, it only gets tightened. It only strengthens the knot until one day, finally, the string snaps. My first meeting with depression was through my best friend. Her name's Ellie, and I promise you she's the liveliest person you will ever meet. Her energy is so affectionate and always has filled up a room whenever she walked into it. One day, little grade 7 Ellie and I were laughing our stomachs off. It was like little kids high on sugar. And then suddenly, so abruptly, she stopped and said, "Sarah, I can't laugh anymore." Being my naive self, I smiled wide and said, "Oh, stop, I'm not that funny." And then she said in a very panicked but also angry tone, "No, you just don't understand." Later, after break time and 2 lessons, I had learned that Ellie was not always the happy-go-lucky girl that I saw. She'd been struggling with depression for over a year, and it was only the day before that she planned on killing herself that she finally reached out. Today, Ellie is alive and well. She is a passionate musician and still my best friend. Her days are filled with joy and sunshine, sometimes grief and rain too. Her new reality is carefully put together with therapy and sometimes medication. Ellie has shown me what it is to be brave. When I was asking Ellie if I could use her story in my speech, she said to me, "Sarah, I didn't know how to speak. I never planned on telling you what I was feeling that day. But tell them to speak, even if they don't know how to." I often wonder what would have happened if she hadn't burst of desperation in that moment. I don't know if I would still have my best friend here with me today. I think it's also important to mention that depression includes sadness, but sadness is not depression. Sadness, while it isn't our favorite emotion, is a very normal part of the human experience. It is vital that we have moments of little heartbreak to know where the joy in life is, to even know what joy means. If your friend moves far away, if you catch a cold, or even if you fail a test, and other life experiences like these are only bound to make you feel a little upset. I'm not in any means implying that wrestling with the feeling of sadness is an easy ride, but it is when this short sadness turns into debilitating hopelessness, into a monster of intrusive thoughts, into what feels like a paralysis of one's body. It is then we must force ourselves to reach out for help. A person with depression is often absolutely convinced of the false reality they have created. They really do believe that no one loves them, they are incapable of success, and that there is no point in life. The blind belief of this deception is what makes depression so hard to recover from. Talking about this sad reality, however, is the first step to decreasing its abundance of presence in our generation. When you talk about mental health struggles, you create a ripple of change that inspires others to talk about their struggles too. You not only become the hero of your own story, you become the catalyst in someone else recognizing that they can become the hero of their own story. Science in this area, while still primitive, has shown us that the structure of the brain changes in illnesses like OCD, depression, ADHD. We are able to see a physical difference a drastic change, not only in the structure of brains, but the activity levels between controlled individuals and those that suffer from a mental illness. Advancement in technologies like SPECT and PET scans can prove to us that these issues are so very, very real. So when we talk about mental health, we must talk about it as health, because that's what it is. The pandemic has been a journey for all of us as a community, and also for us as individuals. I believe it has created a beautiful sense of togetherness, an awareness that we are all collectively going through these trying times together. And so now, more than ever, it is vital to talk, to share your story, your celebrations and your successes and your struggles and your downfalls too. I know that for many people who endure depression, talking about it is only scratching the level when it comes to treatment. But I also know that if we get more comfortable and more open about talking, when we even feel like it's the smallest of issues, it can reduce the likelihood of depression becoming so prevalent in someone's life. Because depression is a monster, and monsters thrive in darkness. So it is time to shed light on these parts of ourselves we keep so well hidden. It's time to take off the mask. Being honest about depression, whether you are struggling or have struggled with any mental illness, is so freeing as much as terrifying. It is freeing like a weight lifted off your shoulder. It is freeing like taking off the mask after a busy, busy day. As Zora Neale Hurston once said, if you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. Many of us have danced with the demons of the mind. So let our lesson be that there is so much strength in vulnerability, and there is so much power and ease in being seen as real and as raw as you truly are. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that story with us. I'm sure people will now open up more easily. Now calling up our second speaker, Sanjit Saha, is a national level record holder in swimming, the most significant part of her personality. When she's not at swimming meets, she enjoys public speaking, advocating women's rights and mental health. She's a voracious reader and writer, and ready to convey ideas of social importance. Having occupied the leadership position at her previous school, she has spoken at various school events. Sanjiti believes in her ability to bring a tangible change in the world, and she aims to voice out of her opinions and experiences at TEDxYouth JNIS2022.
There is not a single person in this world that gets through life unscathed. But the people that do walk through the toughest times and fight through every storm they face possess the epitome of resilience at their core. If I asked you right now, how many of us feel that pang of envy at the picture-perfect lives that people around us always seem to be living? How many times do we think to ourselves, why do bad things always happen to me? Those are two very destructive beliefs. But as humans, we can't help but have that thought process, right? The reality is that everybody at some point has come face to face with countless challenges of varying magnitude. Some that leave a permanent mark on us, while others that sting for a bit of time and eventually fade away. When you accept that pain and suffering is a part of the human experience and that life is not always fair, you will feel liberated and undeniably gain the unparalleled power of resilience. For me, it took 3 personal changes and 2 years to really tap into the resilience that I knew I possessed, but could only practically harness in times of adversity. To put things into perspective, in 2015, I was awarded as India's fastest female swimmer in my age category. And that put me on this glorious pedestal where people only celebrated the highs of every moment. I was merely 10 years of age, but I was exclusively aware of one feeling: success. In fact, I had become so programmed to the repeated fulfillment of my goals that when the time to actually confront failure and adversity came, I was remarkably unprepared for what came next. One day, I came back from school, and my mother sat me down on a table and broke the news to me that my coach, who had been the driving force behind me attaining that level of success, had passed away. And I remember sitting on that table, feeling shattered with devastation. For one, his dynamic personality had been a major contributor to the person I was becoming. And 2, I had been training to participate at the national games that was scheduled to happen just a few months from that incident, which made me feel so perplexed at the timing of life. But I knew I had to pick myself up and embark on this journey of training without his presence. Did my plan include participating at the nationals without being trained by him? No. Did I have a plan B in mind? Absolutely not, because my plan A never included him passing away. Did I go ahead and do it anyway? Yes. As you can imagine, for a 12-year-old, dealing with the loss of such an influential person on my life was tremendously difficult. His commitment inspired me to be the quintessence of dedication, but the void of his absence led me into a downward spiral, which obviously impacted my performance. From winning 6 gold medals in 2015 to being unable to win a single medal in 2016 took a major toll on me. But the remembrance of the never give up attitude that my late coach had instilled within me gave me just that boost of power that I needed to keep going. From that day onwards, I set my goals and worked towards them every day. Fast forward a few months, where I met with yet another one of life's obstacles. From the grueling intensity of my training sessions, I learned that I had developed a borderline shoulder injury, which was essentially an imbalance in my physique that would cause me to drastically decrease the intensity at which I was training. Losing somebody who was such an important part of my life, having to face failure for the first time, experiencing a huge downfall in my performance, and meeting with a borderline shoulder injury, all collectively falling upon me, almost led me into giving up. But standing here today, I'm happy it was almost, because I followed through and persevered, and I was eventually successful. The following year, I went on to break several national records. To say facing those obstacles at such a young age was difficult would be an understatement. But in retrospect, I am grateful to have had every single one of those experiences, because those experiences instilled the supreme skill of resilience within me, which is something that I have used to get through the troughs of life and acknowledge the crests in all their glory. Every single person possesses resilience. It's harnessing that power that lies embedded within you in times you need it is what counts. How many of us have slap bang been in the middle of adversity or seen someone we love go through it? Be it the death of a loved one, a mental illness, being diseased, or absolutely anything else, physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, or financial. It's not a stretch to say everybody has been in that position somewhere at some time. Does anybody breeze through life? Absolutely not. Not even the happy-go-lucky bunch of people who are seemingly always leading the perfect life. In fact, they're the people who have actually mastered the art of staying firmly planted within the ground through the storm and can thus genuinely enjoy living life to the fullest whenever they get their dance in the rain moments. What I'm saying is there is unmatched power in the acceptance of sticky situations. Resilience is that personality trait that lies behind authenticity and humility. The people who actually understand the essence of living life to the fullest, a phrase we hear so often, are the ones who can actually acknowledge when their vulnerability kicks in. But don't let that pain, sorrow, or failure take over their life, which leads me to my next point. In order to lead a fulfilled life, we need to be more alert of our emotions. Life is like a swinging pendulum, and you only get so long before life strikes you yet again. Mentally strong people aren't afraid to be vulnerable, but they don't stay stuck in that problems so that they can genuinely get that bit of downtime of relief before life strikes yet again with another challenge. For me, that time in 2016, with innumerable challenges coming at me, I really learned to be grateful for those in-between moments where I could reflect on the meaning of my life instead of lamenting about all the distressing incidents that had been happening in the past months. Secondly, resilient people have learned to let go of things they cannot control, which also ties into the fact that in order to let go, we need to be more accepting of inevitable change. When my coach passed away, that was something that was completely out of my realm of control. Sometimes the only thing that lies within your radar is your attitude. I was broken, but I did not and could not let the pain define me. Going to the pool deck every day after he passed away and having to experience the vacuum of his absence was painful. But I channeled that pain and turned it into power by recognizing the impact that he had on my life. There are two broad things that you can do after facing adversity. One is revisiting that place of sorrow and staying stuck until you find something else to be unhappy about. Or two, grieving, which is completely normal. Then being grateful for what you currently have and accepting life for all its complexities with grace. The first method focuses your thoughts on the problem and prevents you from finding a practical solution. The second process, on the other hand, ensures you deal with the discomfort at that moment so that you don't prolong your own pain by wallowing in self-pity. The mantra of the 3 Gs, grieving, being grateful, and living life with grace, unmistakably equips you to face life in all its forms. Possessing resilience is powerful and brave. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we were shut out from the world physically due to isolation. But mentally, our minds were still subjected to so much external suffering. Seeing the number of people who were losing their lives rising daily, losing our loved ones, job losses, financial struggles, and people being subjected to myriads of other challenges. Dealing with those experiences has made us emerge as so much more resilient, and we deserve to be applauded for that. The people around you may be going through something right now, which you may not necessarily know about, or they may not be very open about it. So be kind to others. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. And I want you to know, if you are in the middle of absolutely any challenge right now, those situations may break you down in the moment, but they will build you up as a person. Let go of your destructive belief of life's unfairness. Be conscious of your in-between moments of relief and learn to turn your pain into your power. Remove the mask of pretentious happiness and walk through your most vulnerable moments, knowing that these difficult experiences are exactly what is building you up to be the most resilient version of yourself, so that you can take on life and all its intricacies just like you were meant to. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjiti, for sharing that experience. Overcoming the barriers you mentioned has definitely made you more resilient and inspired many. Next up, we have a rendition by the JNIS band composed of TK Srikanth, Arjun Gore, and Neel Maheshwari performing I Walk Alone. The song resonates with our theme of Behind the Mask as it expounds the underlying suppressed emotions and feelings of despondency and solitude.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's only me and I walk alone. I walk this empty street on the boulevard of broken dreams, where the city sleeps and I'm the only one and I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk my shadow's only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone out there will find me. Till then I walk alone. I'm walking down the line that divides me somewhere in my mind, on the borderline of the edge and where I walk alone. Read between the lines what's messed up and everything's alright. beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone out there will find me. Till then I walk alone.
Siddhant Karnik is a multi-talented actor known for his performances on a variety of media: theatre, films, television, improvised comedy, and voiceovers. And when he is not in front of the camera, he sets off to distant corners of India, chronicling his adventures through his YouTube channel and exercising his affinity for motorcycles and storytelling. After his previous impactful TED Talks, Life of a Motorcycle Monk and Failure Can Be Awesome, he is back yet again at TEDxYouth JNIS 2022. Don't miss it.
In 2019, when I gave my first TED Talk, I predicted a future where air wouldn't be free to breathe. I just didn't know that I was predicting my future and how soon it would be hitting home. My father was sitting right there in the audience. In July 2020, during the first wave of COVID, I, like many, was struggling to find my father an ICU bed with a ventilator. We used all our contacts and connections, and yet we found it to be a monumental task to find a war veteran, a hero brigadier, a hospital with a supply of oxygen. My mother was isolated, I was isolated, we couldn't even go and visit him until his last day. How do we know when it's someone's last day until it was their last day? On that day, I was allowed to meet him, just me. My mother wasn't allowed, she had to wait outside the hospital. I went in wearing 2 masks, a PPE suit, gloves, taped and sealed my hands, a head mask, a face shield, to the point that only my eyes were visible, everything else masked for protection. I went into the ICU, and a place with white light, machines beeping, patients coughing. It's a strange time capsule, this ICU. No night or day, just a constant loop. Many like myself in PPE suits, differentiated only by our heights and eyes. My father lay there on the bed, a fraction of himself. Eyes closed, breathing heavily. He was wearing a mask, a ventilator aiding him in his breathing. I came up next to his bed, gently touched him. He didn't wake up. The doctor came onto his other side, clinically shook him awake. He opened his eyes, looked into mine, and lunged up towards me. Despite all the masks that I wore, he still recognized me. See, parents have this instinct to look beyond the masks that we wear. He conversed with hand gestures because he had the ventilator on. This loud machine kept me from hearing his last words. 9 months later, April of 2021, between the 2 lockdowns, I find myself driving solo on top of a mountain pass. It had snowed heavily the day before. The pass was said to have been cut off. So I went to see for myself where it was said to be cut off. So I drove and drove for 2 hours, covering only 16 kilometers, until I found myself 2 kilometers short of the summit. There was ice all around, black ice on the road. My car was slipping, but the 4x4 held strong. And I carried on those last 2 kilometers, knowing that if something was to happen to me, no one would be coming by for the next 3 days to help or rescue. A feeling of fear, excitement, exhilaration, anxiety, fear again, all of them cocktailing into an overwhelming feeling came over me, and I burst out crying. I mean, I was bawling in tears. I didn't know what I was crying about. I didn't need to know. I just felt, and I let go. I cried until I reached the summit. I got out of the car, and it seemed like that I'd reached the top of the world. And suddenly it struck me that I haven't seen a vehicle go past or go by. The mountain was said to be cut off for the next 3 days. There was nobody on that mountain, not a bird in sight. And that's when I really let go. I cried like never before. See, I grew up in an army background where the narrative was that boys don't cry. I grew out of that narrative and I became an actor and was encouraged to cry and make others cry. So I thought I was very familiar and comfortable with this primal, beautiful emotion of crying. Until that day, when I was all alone on a mountaintop and I let go. I screamed my pain away, I howled the weight away until I broke out into laughter. It was crazy, I felt crazy, but I felt light too. I felt unburdened, a catharsis had just happened. For the first time, I was all by myself, and that's rare in India. I was all by myself, I was myself. There was nobody around me to be a certain way, to be any way. So I unmasked myself. And that's when it happened. I heard a laugh. It was my father's laugh. I connected with him then. I checked in with him. And I had that conversation with him that I couldn't in the ICU. On my way back down from the mountain, I passed this most tranquil, peaceful forest with no sound or shine of human presence. I was now listening without any filters, breathing without any masks, just being light and almost floating. I took out my drone and I flew it in the forest. See, as a drone pilot, I become one with the drone. Flying through the forest, the camera becomes my eyes. I'm there flying, and when I return home, I see my body in the same frame in real time. It's this out-of-body experience, this really deep spiritual feeling which comes over. Hey. And that's when it hit me. The conversation I just had with my father, it wasn't his soul flying around waiting for me to be at 12,300 feet up on a mountain all alone to access him. No, he was and always has been right there inside of me. See, he left his imprint within me. I just couldn't access him. Maybe because I just couldn't access him. Maybe because of all the metaphorical masks I wore. But just with this perception shift, I could access him now. Anytime, anywhere. My conversations with him now are a lot faster than when he was alive. There's no waiting or buffering time. In a strange way, he again saw through all the masks that I wore. I got back into the car. I was processing all that had just happened, and I realized that the catharsis that I just went through, when I just let go of all these masks that I was wearing of bravado, of responsibility, of courage, when I had the courage to be vulnerable and open and authentic to myself, basically when I unmasked myself, I had this deep spiritual experience, this realization that the biggest loss of my life turned out to be a step forward in the evolution of myself. See, I always struggled with clarity. I was indecisive, from the small decisions to the big ones. I could never come to a decision confidently, clearly. But enduring the greatest loss of my life shattered me and shattered all the masks that I wore. And when I started picking myself back up again with the realizations that there were parts of me that I don't resonate with anymore, that being a certain way was just a waste of valuable time, time which is limited for us all. Because how do we know it's our last day until it is our last day? Gautam Buddha says, the way to Nirvana is to know thyself. These masks that we wear to protect ourselves, this pretense we put on to put across an image that no one can mess with me or take me for a ride, it's great. It helps, it's needed most of the times, but in the process of that, I forgot to take my masks off. I forgot to be vulnerable, to be true to myself. I did not know myself because I wore all these different masks for the different roles I played, not just in my acting career, but in my life too. I played the responsible son, I played the ideal husband, I wore the mask of courage and confidence when I faced a camera or presented in front of a crowd, this tool needed for that time, but I forgot to take off these masks when I was alone or with trusted friends. Because I started believing that that mask was me and not a tool that I should use from time to time to aid me. That same tool had become a wall that restricted me from clarity. It takes a monumental event in one's life that makes one stop and remove all these masks that I put on along the way of life. COVID, helplessly finding oxygen for my father, not being with him during his last few breaths, not being able to see him during his last rites because he was wrapped in an opaque plastic, sealed in a body bag and pushed into electric crematorium. Was that monumental moment for me that made me stop, breathe, and then accept a new direction of life. I share these intimate, difficult memories with you because I've realized that honesty is a tool that I can use to unmask myself. Another tool that works for me is solo travel. See, I do believe if travel is education, then adventure travel is higher education. In this form of higher education, of solo traveling, I'm vulnerable to the world, and most of the times I am humbled by the situations I find myself in. And the plans that don't work out to be better than I could have planned it myself. Being humbled allows me to take off the masks of ego, of pride, of being closed and unreceptive, and just opens me up, lightens my load. Because when I don't wear a mask, I am open, I'm vulnerable, I feel lighter, I feel liberated, I feel connected, I feel authentic. Things make sense to me, and things that don't, I say I don't know the answer and I need help in finding it. And help does come. Help comes in a similar, authentic, honest way, and a connection is made that's pure, that's honest, that's special, that's beautiful. All this happened to me once I started taking off these metaphorical masks I was wearing, these masks that I forgot to take off because life seemed like it needed me to wear it all the time. I realized that from time to time I need to check in with myself without the masks. Because then conversations with myself become richer. Conversation with others become richer. Less bullshit comes out, more bullseyes go in. So, unlearn, unveil, unwind, unlink, unplug, unleash, unsettle, understand, and unmask. From a motorcycle monk, you live just once, but if you live it right, once is enough.
Thank you, sir. We cannot even imagine your loss and what you had to go through, but sharing your story today has surely inspired many. Our next speaker, Dr. Shifali Bhatra, is the founder of Mindframes, a wellness organization aimed at destigmatizing mental health and spreading awareness about psychological wellness. She's also the author of Teenage Matters, one of the first few professionals to optimally use technology in mindfulness training and cognitive analysis, an advocate for mindfulness and self-awareness, and so much more. She is here to enlighten us about the depression pandemic, exposing the truth behind depression and rejecting the associated stigma.
She wasn't feeling good about life, but she couldn't pinpoint why. She didn't think she needed help. It'll get better, she thought, if I try. The sadness sunk deep and deeper. Soon she couldn't eat or sleep. It's all in your head, her mum would say, if she ever saw her daughter weep. You've got it all going for you, Sheila. Your life is nothing like the grind. Why don't you just pull up your socks and get rid of what's irking your mind? So she smiled and studied and joked. You would never have guessed that beneath that pretty mask you saw, Sheila was severely depressed. Months passed. It was just another day. They had to break open her bedroom door. She had hanged herself to death. Short life, short story. She was no more. Sheila was hiding her depression behind a mask. She took a step to end her suffering, but it was a drastic one. She ended her life. Sheila isn't alone. According to the World Health Organization, right now there are more than 280 million people on the globe who are depressed. Nearly one half of these live in the Southeast Asia and Western Pacific regions, which predominantly include India and China. Depression is the single largest contributor to global disability and a major reason for suicide deaths, which number more than 700,000 in a year. In fact, suicide is the fourth leading cause of death in the young 15 to 19-year-olds worldwide. Masks, we know, are protective face coverings, but typically they are used for disguise, to hide from others. Masks make it hard to recognize who or what lies beneath. How could a mask be protective for a depressed person like Sheila? What was this wearer trying to hide? It's shame, humiliation, and embarrassment. That is why she couldn't express how she felt or do something to make it better. Stigmatization of mental illness has a tradition. In ancient Greece, stigma was a bad word that branded slaves and criminals. Depression and other mental illnesses weren't treated very different. The sufferers were imprisoned, banished, and tortured. Middle Ages called these the punishment of God or possession by the devil. The penalty was to be burned alive or chained to the beds and walls in the so-called madhouses. Now, you might argue, this was long ago and things are different now. Results of a 2020 research in BMC Psychiatry about stigma affirm that 1/3 Indians hold negative attitudes and 1 in 5 have actual or intended stigmatizing behaviors towards mental illness. Society can be so unaccepting of the autonomy of depressed people that it does not consider them capable of managing their personal and professional lives. This stereotyping makes depression attract synonyms like character flaw, incompetence, and even dangerousness. That is why the emotions that common people feel in response to such prejudiced thoughts are anger, resentment, and fear. So they discriminate depressed people by withholding employment, delaying promotions, avoiding marrying them, or breaking social contact. This way, emotional trauma for depressed persons becomes twofold. First, they battle the limitations and disability that depression inherently poses on a day-to-day basis. Second, they must agonize the stereotypes, judgment, and discrimination, not just from an ignorant and aloof society at large, but also from friends, family, partners, neighbors, and other near and dear ones who they love and trust most. Why would such a person not hide his or her dark reality behind a mask? The depression trap is a cunning one. Depression either convinces you that there is no out, or even more insidiously, that there is no pathology in the first place. That is why, for someone who hasn't experienced its sting, depression can seem ridiculous. How ridiculous that she doesn't want to study, even when this is her time in life too. Isn't it odd when she says that she won't eat her food? Maybe this is a cry for attention. It's bizarre when she says that she can't brush her teeth or bathe. I mean, this is something we all do every day, right? Ask depressed people how they feel. I've seen so many of them and heard all of their accounts. They understand and explain depression better in metaphors than I ever could scientifically. One called it a dragon, waiting each minute to slay her. Another said depression felt like he was attending his own funeral every day. The sad tune just wouldn't stop. A third saw it as a thick, poisonous fog, suffocating him persistently. He found it hard to navigate life through it. A manual laborer described it to me as a road roller, crushing everything in life that he found meaningful. And then the bodybuilder, he said his depression felt like an exceptionally strong gravitational force, drawing him downward. He said he didn't have the muscle to push up against it. And then the high school student, she simulated it to a sneaky virus. I have no idea how I caught it, she said. It doesn't let me answer phone calls, isolates me from friends, and colors everything in my life in a dark tone. The artist said depression gave him a photographic memory. The only problem was his brain kept all the negatives. Such creativity alongside the agony. My big concern was, why were all of these people seeing me alone without the support of friends and family? Many of us rightfully acknowledge that depression is an illness. It's the mask that eludes us. Because even though depression is a medical illness, it's also incredibly different. It's not as unassuming as a malaria or a common cold, where the patient preemptively runs to the professional, requests tests, and seeks medication and other alternative therapies to feel better. Behind the mask, people with depression question their need for help. How come others manage these issues so effortlessly? Why is my brother confident and me feeble? Why was this endless struggle uniquely crafted for me alone? Am I fragile and incompetent? Why can I not handle this like others do? We become wired for self-deprecation when we are depressed. I was sitting by myself at a cafe once in the neighborhood. The group of 14 on the adjoining table seemed loud. One of them, I noticed, was unusually quiet. Then I realized I had seen her at my clinic once, many years ago. She didn't recognize me, though. I was just observing from a distance, sipping on my jasmine tea. Then, one from the gang announced, "I have an endoscopy in 3 days, guys. This gastritis is such a nuisance. I'll let you know how I do." Immediately, the others responded, "Hey, do you need a ride to the hospital? Should I arrange for bland food post the endoscopy? I'll cover up for you at work if you like." I was hoping that the quiet one I knew would stand up and say, "Friends, I'm depressed, and I've been seeing a psychiatrist. I haven't been compliant with my treatment. I need your support to encourage me for therapy, to feel better, to live a happier life, a life that I know I deserve." But no, she shied behind her mask. Ironic, isn't it? Because the truth is, depression is a much bigger killer than gastritis. We need a deeper consciousness about depression. It starts with a willingness to realize that depression doesn't happen only to other people. Each of us, you and I, are other people for someone else. One morning at my office, I interviewed a young patient with a very traumatic history. There were plenty of stressors: a parental divorce, suicidal death in a younger sibling, unhelpful relatives, litigation, financial crisis. I knew I had a lot of work to do in helping her feel better. So I started on medication and set a therapy schedule. She was very concerned about confidentiality. I assured her that no one would know who she was and that she had visited me. That same evening, I met with another patient with a similar history. There was an uncanny resemblance. Now, you and I know that sadness is not a unique emotion, and stressors that people experience could overlap. But these two even shared the last name. As I browsed through my office notes later, I wasn't surprised to realize that they had the same house address. Obviously, they were siblings. Then I wondered, were they also going to hide the same medicine in two locations in the same home? Siblings, ashamed to tell each other how they felt and that they needed help. How will things ever get better if depression consistently stays piggybacked with shame, guilt, and awkwardness? How will we curb the depression pandemic? We can't fortify our food with antidepressants, like iodized salt for thyroid illnesses. We can't add selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors to drinking water. Biological deficits are known to cause depression, but it isn't the chemical imbalance in the brain which sustains it. It's the negative attitudes about its causality and treatment that keep this illness alive and allow it to grow. People still have a distaste that if they went out and sought treatment for depression, then their vulnerabilities would be exposed or their brains would get transformed in clandestine ways. One of my patients refused to record her thoughts and emotions in a mood log I had generated for her. "Are you going to perform voodoo on my thoughts, doctor?" she asked. "I think just let me be the way I am. Therapy is too scary." Treatment frightened her more than depression did. On the other hand, some people believe that the experience of depression is profoundly natural, that sorrow and misery are normal responses to life's ups and downs, and that sadness, it's part of our personality, something that makes us human. If I give it some more time, it'll just get better. Does it? If you don't see the enemy, how will you fight him? And if you see him and assume that he's going to turn around and go away, how will you win the battle? We need to start talking about depression. Have frank discussions about feelings with your children, parents, friends, family, partners, and neighbors. Understand the signs and symptoms of depression. Know that while the typical depressives may appear melancholic, sad, and quiet, the ones hiding behind the mask could be angry, irritable, and antagonistic. Recognize the facade of fatigue when they're always too tired to engage. Acknowledge the cover-up of recklessness when you spot risk-taking and rage. Know that they could get angry because pretense can be so draining. Identify that they can get hysterical as it's the only attention they're gaining. And if by chance you see a big broad smile, don't let that take you for a ride, because oftentimes bigger the smile outside, deeper is the depression inside. Depressed people are not always lonely and crying. The happiest and friendliest people you know could be so close to the falling side of the edge with no safety net to hold them if they dropped. If, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 20 persons is depressed, imagine how many of these are in your phone book, family, friend circle, school, office, or neighborhood. It doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to see behind the mask. Just a little bit of awareness, willingness, and responsiveness. Happiness is a mask we all wear. Depression is the secret we all share. Let's come out with the truth. Then I think the game will be fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for helping us to understand the significance of destigmatizing depression. And with that, we have come to the end of TEDx Youth at JNIS 2022. An end is only a beginning in disguise. And at the end of our TEDx Youth at JNIS event today, I, Carissa Arora, the co-organizer of this event, would want us to cherish the beginning of new ideas, compelling arguments, and of new inventions. Let us together cherish the capacity of our minds to challenge pre-existing beliefs and perspectives in our contemporary world. Sanjiti's taking advantage of adversity and building resilience, Sara's strength in vulnerability, Siddhant's When I Unmasked Myself, and Dr. Shifali's The Depression Pandemic are all indeed ideas worth sharing. Just as Dr. Shifali's speech was successful in destigmatizing depression, Siddhant dug deep and unmasked himself with a lot of introspection. Sanjati and Sara brought their distinctive perspectives to this event as well, and I think the audience had a lot to gain from a personal experience as well as recognizing hidden emotions, outward pretenses, and mental health struggles. Overall, I think, as do all of you, that we have been able to effectively address this metaphor of a mask as a barrier to our emotions. This success would only be possible with the help of our organizing committee. License holder Aryan Ghosh, executive producers Saina Pal and Anya Dhankar, curator Khushi Agarwal, digital and design team Himansi Agarwal and Krisma Bajaj, technology team Mahir Shah and Sean Vadwana, event management and marketing team Tara Kaushik and Yashal Vora, and our supervising teachers, Ms. Galanki Balamani and Ms. Shweta Odani. Thank you.